Hi everyone, my name is Kent C. Dodds and I'm excited to talk with you today about practically testing. But I just want to introduce myself to you in case you never met me before. I am a software engineer. I work with JavaScript primarily, 100% is what primarily means in that context. And I do a lot of front-end stuff with React, and I do plenty of Node stuff. I am an Egghead instructor. I've instructed on front-end masters. I'm a GDE, been on the TC39 as a delegate for PayPal. I do a lot of open source, and I created epicreact.dev and testingjavascript.com. And that's kind of where I'm doing all of my stuff now, is making these courses to make the world a better place by teaching people how to make quality software. My talk is practically testing, and its subtitle, Should I Write a Test or Fix a Bug? And this is based on a blog post that I wrote about this that you can go take a look at later. You can find my slides on GitHub. And I'm from Utah. I have a family and a website, and I'm on Twitter. I want to do a special shout out to testingjavascript.com because that's kind of relevant to this crowd. So this is your essential guide to flawless testing. It's a self-paced workshop, a series of 8 modules where you learn everything that I know about testing JavaScript specifically, from the total basics, fundamentals of all that, all the way to really advanced concepts for testing lower level as well as higher level stuff. We talk about the testing trophy a lot. If you've heard of that, I created the testing trophy as part of testingjavascript.com. And we have some really cool interviews with some experts that you might be familiar with. Like Kent Beck, for example. So some really cool people on there. Go check out testingjavascript.com. Okay, so I like to start my talks out with some expectations so that we all are on the same page here. This talk is a practical talk about testing versus other things that we can do with our time. And I give some relatable examples, so I'll be asking you to think about what would you do in this situation. And this talk is not going to be any code examples or demos or anything like that. And if you want to know my font and theme, then feel free to take a look at those. Okay, so let's say that you're a developer and you're building an app. As a dev, you have a lot of things to think about. You have features to spec out, designs to implement, emails to send, meetings to attend, tickets to comment on, code to write, code to debug, test to write, tools to configure, etc., etc., etc. Like, we go on forever. There are so many things that we have to do as software engineers that are more than just code. It's not just we're coders for 8 hours in the day. In fact, you're lucky if you're coding for 4 hours in the day at any of the bigger companies that I've worked at. So we all feel just this overpowering weight of the things that we are expected to do. And what do we do about this? How could you take what this poor individual is dealing with and deal with this in a way that you can push your company's mission forward? And that is, we prioritize. And we've gotten pretty good at this generally for the lifespan of humanity, at taking a look at all of the things we have to do and putting them in some sort of order. But I want to talk about, how do we put these things in order? Like, what order do we put them in? And so how do we prioritize these things? I think the first step and the most important thing is to identify your company's mission. And so your company's mission may be this like little pamphlet that they gave you on orientation, and you may not even remember what it is. Or it could just be a phrase that everybody recites at the beginning of every meeting, like it just whatever your company culture is. But identifying what the company's mission is and getting a good grasp of that company mission is really important in being able to prioritize the activities that you take, because some things are more important of the company are, and in particular, the role that you play in that mission. So there are different activities that you're going to be doing as a DevOps engineer than you might participate in as a product manager, for example. So you need to identify what the company's mission is, and then also identify your place in that company mission. That's not to say that you can't also identify things that other things that need to happen in the company, and you can provide a lot of value to the company by helping and reminding other people, I suppose, or like giving people ideas of things that they can do as part of pushing the company mission forward. But that's where we focus all of our time and attention when we're starting prioritizing things, is how do how do these things apply to the company mission? So once you have that idea of what the company mission is, then you need to identify mission related activities. So often these come to you just like naturally as part of your work. If you're a dev, these are going to come in the form of tickets in your ticket tracker, and you talk about them at sprint planning or whatever. If you're a product manager, then maybe you're talking to users and getting customer feedback and stuff like that. But somehow in your regular work, you're going to be able to identify these mission related activities, and then just like I said, keep your head up and think about different things that you can do and innovate so that you can push your mission forward. And then step 3 is to take all those activities and rank them according to the risk to the mission. And the way that you do this is using a risk matrix. So here on the left, we've got the likelihood, and on the bottom, we have the impact. And the higher the likelihood, the higher the impact, the more critical to the mission, or the more critical of a risk it is. So this could be a risk of like, if we don't do this, then these really bad things can happen, or a risk of this thing is happening, we need to stop doing that, or our competition's going to take us over, or whatever the case may be. And so this basically just tells you how important it is for this thing to get completed. And so once you have all of these mission related activities sorted or given a risk score, then you can sort them more appropriately. But there's something that the risk matrix kind of misses. It's not just the likelihood and the impact of something happening. It's also the time that it takes, or the time that changes what that risk is. So let's say that we have a feature that our salespeople have promised that's, months in the future. And so we're like, okay, whatever. We just work on this other stuff. Every day that you get closer to that date you promised to have this delivered, the risk to the company or the risk to that particular feature increases, and it increases rapidly as that date gets closer. And so you need to consider the risk to the company mission of not doing a certain thing or continuing to do something you need to stop over time. And we typically do this like kind of naturally as part of our sprint planning and things and grooming sessions and stuff like that. But you do need to, even outside of that context, as you're thinking about, okay, what am I going to do today? At a very granular level, you can say, well, I need to get this done first. And then as the day goes on and you're getting toward the end of the day, you're like, oh yeah, I need to get that thing done right now. Otherwise it's not going to get done today. So you need to be thinking about how time is impacting the risk assessment that you had. How bad would it be if we don't do this today or tomorrow or next week or next year? So keep time in the back of your mind. Time is also like a real beast, because there's another part of time that plays a role in all of this. And that is, if the task that you see before you, this thing that you're trying to prioritize, if it just takes a few minutes, then why wouldn't you just do it now? And David Allen has this book called Getting Things Done, Stress-Free Productivity. And he says, if it takes less than 2 minutes, then do it now. And that's pretty good advice, but I would temper that with this warning from this blog post, and I've experienced this in myself. They mentioned 2 shortcomings for this 2-minute rule, and that is, first, my life is just filled with 2-minute activities. I could spend my entire day just doing 2-minute activities. So you need to make sure that you don't go overboard on this 2-minute rule. Now, like, frankly, it'd be really nice to get all these 2-minute activities done. It's like a thorn in your foot when you're on a long walk. Like, you should probably take care of that. But if you just spend your entire day doing 2-minute activities, then you may not get the progress on the things that you're trying to accomplish, and your mission may fail. However, if it's like something that could be really useful, and then, just get that one thing done in 2 minutes, then come back to your other thing. The other problem with the 2-minute thing that you just need to keep in mind is at least I, and other people have told me that this applies to them as well. I'm really bad at estimating how long something's going to take. As a software engineer, I'm just really bad at it. I accept this, and I have to deal with this. So what I would suggest is, that like you set some sort of timer in your head, or maybe even a literal timer when you say, okay, this is just a 2-minute task. I'll just get it done really quick. And if it ends up taking more than 2 minutes, which often happens, like, oh yeah, I forgot I need to update the dependencies in this project, so I can update that. And then pretty soon you end the day and you haven't gotten anything on your original list completed. You may have pushed the ball forward on a few other things, but those kind of jump to the line in priority, where what really should happen is if it takes more than just 2 minutes, let's put that on the issue tracker and prioritize it accordingly, because it's not just a 2-minute thing. So beware of the 2-minute rule, but be aware of the 2-minute rule. Okay, so what does all this have to do with testing? So why do we prioritize things in the first place? What's the whole reason? So remember that cartoon with all the stacks of papers and everything. Like, why do we even need to prioritize? We've got all this stuff to do. Why don't we just do it all? And then when we're all done with it, then we're all done, right? So why do we need to say which one we're going to do first? The reason is because every single one of these things that we're doing, whether it be testing or writing the implementation of the software, designing the software, or talking about the design of the software, or whatever it is, all of these different activities, these mission-related activities, actually take the same currency. And that currency is time. So and it's a zero-sum game too. You don't get any more time. You don't get any less time than anybody else. We all have the exact same amount of time. And you have a limited number of keystrokes in your fingers. And so you have to think about, okay, so I need to make sure that I get this thing done. Otherwise, I won't have time to get these other things done or whatever. So this is why we need to think about prioritizing when we're talking about testing, because we don't just test for test's sake. It doesn't exist on its own. Who cares if your software is tested if it's not shipped to users and making the world better? So we need to prioritize things relative to the mission of the company, and testing is just one of the activities that we can do to push the mission of the company forward. So I'm going to show you a couple of scenarios, and I want you to think about where would you prioritize these different things, given the context that I give you, and maybe we'll come up with different answers. Hopefully not, but we'll see. So here's our scenario one. You're at a company that sells cute stuffed animal koalas, like Cody the koala, and it also you let people leave reviews on the different koalas that they buy. So scenario A, or you have two things going on here. A bug prevents users from changing their bio if they don't have an avatar first. And B, your product checkout flow is not covered by tests. Okay, so what do you do? Well, clearly we want to do both of these things, right? You wouldn't want to just leave this like it is forever. That reduces your users' confidence in the application. But you also want to make sure that you're covering your checkout flow by test. So let's talk about A first. Let's do a risk analysis of this. So I would say that the likelihood is high. This is, in fact, it's as high as it can be, right? Because this actually happens to real users. It's a bug. It's a thing that happens. It's not like it's likely to happen. This is a thing that happens. But the impact is relatively low because most of our users, maybe this is context I could have added. There's some domain knowledge for you. But most of our users have their avatar set already. It's like the first thing that they do when they sign up. And so the likelihood is high because it's a bug. It's a thing that happens, but the impact is pretty low because there are few users who need to do this activity. So it's something we want to get fixed, but it's not like super important. Whereas the checkout flow, not covered by tests. Well, if our mission of the company is to fill the world with these cute stuffed animal koalas, we're not going to accomplish that mission very well if the checkout flow is broken. Now, the likelihood of this happening, maybe it's low, or like, because you're like, oh no, our engineers are super careful. They'll never break the checkout flow. I don't care how careful your engineers are. It is going to happen. And so maybe medium or high for the likelihood is probably a better ranking there. The impact though, it doesn't matter what the likelihood is. The impact is just so excruciatingly high. We need to get this fixed. And so yes, we are absolutely going to prioritize B over A because the impact is just so high. We need to get this covered by tests so that people don't ship a broken checkout experience on accident. Okay, so scenario 2, you're a startup and you haven't actually started selling your product yet because it's not quite feature complete enough to be useful. You're running out of money. You also just happen to write a small but complicated function to calculate the distance your scrollable list needs to scroll as the user presses the down arrow key, and you're trying to decide whether to test it. So your options are, or these aren't options. You're going to do both of these things, but your priorities are either finish the last few features and ship the product, or test that little small but complicated function. Here, hands down, ship your product. Like, you are in big trouble if you don't ship this product. Who cares if this component is tested? Like, I don't care. Users don't care. Nobody cares. Even if that little thing breaks, who cares? The product isn't shipped. So get that product shipped, for crying out loud. You're running out of money. Stop running out of money. Start shipping your thing. This is assuming that you actually care about the mission of the company. You don't want the company to go under. If you're just there accepting a paycheck, then like, what are you there for? You want to be at a company where you want to push the mission forward. So yeah, you need to get this mission pushed forward. And if you can't get your product sold, then it doesn't matter how well your code base is tested. Now, the other thing to consider is that when you're in a small startup or even a big startup, I guess, but when you're in that phase of the company and product development, it's very easy for the code to just slosh around all over the place. And so you've got a coworker who decides, hey, that cool little UI thing you built, we actually found a library to do that. And so if you spent all of this time writing some tests for that, somebody brings a library that's already well tested, and then we just throw all of your stuff away. So I would strongly advise that in this scenario, you would absolutely just say, you know what, we're not going to test this thing. Let's just get this thing shipped. Now, we got to temper all of this. This is, pragmatic, practical testing. If your salespeople are trying to demo your products, that's not complete, so they understand this. But if they're demoing it and all they're saying are like blank screens and just things are breaking all over the place, that's not good either. And so this is where I would say, like, try some low effort but high value tests, like a couple end-to-end tests that just test the common demo paths to make sure that the things that the salespeople are going to be demoing for you or for the potential buyers will continue to work as you make changes in the product. So yeah, but I certainly wouldn't care about testing a small but complicated function that calculates the distance in your scrollable list. Like, no, don't bother with that. You can do that later, but not now. Okay, scenario 3, you notice there's no visual indication when a user is focused on a button, which is an accessibility bug caused by some misapplied CSS. It should only take a minute or two to fix that. And then alternatively, you also have next week, the sales team is demoing a feature you've just finished implementing, and you have just a few extra tests to add before you can mark it as completed, right? Because a feature isn't complete until it's tested. I suppose unless you're at a startup and all you care about is shipping. So you're trying to decide, okay, so which of these things should I prioritize? Now, if the accessibility bug is just some misapplied CSS and it should only take a minute or two, just do that. Just do it right now. Get it done. Especially where it's an accessibility bug, it has a bigger impact than you probably assume. And the likelihood, because it's a bug, is 100%. So may as well just get that done, especially since it's a small thing. Now, if it turns out that you're like working through this, you've started your timer in your head or your physical timer, and you're like, oh, 2 minutes is up, then yeah, sure, put that on the tracker so that you can get it prioritized. This is a bug; it needs to get fixed. And you don't want to prioritize, you don't want this to jump the line in priority over something that you need to get completed sooner, or that was already prioritized. So I want to make sure it's clear that just because you've got this little thing that shouldn't take very long doesn't mean that it can always just jump the line. If it just does take a minute or two, then go for it and just make it happen. But if it ends up taking longer than that, then get it on the list and get it prioritized and then get it fixed. All right. So our scenario 4, you just put out a production fire. This is the third time for the same bug that you know is hard to write a test for, which is why nobody's written a test for it. And you also expect it to show up again because, third time's not the charm, fourth time is, or whatever. You're just expecting it to happen again. But here's the other real big problem. The marketing team just announced the launch date of a new feature you're responsible for, and things were already tight before you had to deal with that production fire, and now you're worried whether you'll get that feature done in time. So this one's really tough. For both of these, I would say that the impact is high. It's enormous. And the likelihood for A, you feel like it's pretty likely. So these are both, or that one's critical. And then the likelihood of you failing on delivering here, you said it was tight. You were worried about it before you had to deal with the production fire. Now you're pretty certain that it's not going to happen. So you've got a high likelihood and a high impact on both of these. What do? So when you're faced with this situation, this is the time to talk to the decision makers and say, hey, listen, I need more humans working on this. I can't do this by myself. And you explain to them the situation. And this is where I want to just mention a blog post that I wrote called Business and Engineering Alignment, which is a short linked there. But in there, I say, you're not a software engineer hired to code. You're a human hired to push the company's mission forward. So your goal is to get the product shipped or whatever it is that the company's trying to do. You need to make that happen. Both of these things will prevent that mission from being pushed forward in the best way possible. And so when you're trying to convince business that you need to pull people off of other projects to help you with yours, you need to frame it in the mission. You need to think about things like, okay, so here's our mission. And I have these two problems that either one of them failing would have a big impact to our mission. And I can't do them both. I need to have some extra humans working on this with me. And I go in a lot more depth in this blog post. So I encourage you to go check it out. But that's how I convince the business folks to let me do what I want. Or how I convince myself that what I want is not good for the business. And then I quit or I just change what I want. Check out the blog post. It's got some interesting stories in there. Okay. So our last scenario, you just finished implementing a new feature, allowing the user to create a playlist of their favorite songs. You're wondering whether you should add tests. And you also saw an amazing font and editor theme in a live stream from your favorite dev, and you want to ask them what it is so you can try it out. This one's a joke. Don't do B. I actually did list my editor theme and my font, which is Dank Mono and Night Owl. But, we spend so much time. It's so funny to me, but we spend so much time customizing our development environment, and that's fun and interesting. But, don't do that at the expense of the other things that you could do with your time that are more valuable. So let's just wrap this up with a little review. Everything we spend our time on has a same cost, and that's time. It's all even. We don't get any more time. We don't get any less time. We are stuck with this amount of time, and it's up to us to decide how to allocate that time to push the mission forward the best that we can. So you want to focus on things that give you the highest return of your investment of time with regard to the company mission. So you're looking for a return on pushing that mission forward. So when you have all of these different activities that you could do, conduct a risk assessment to identify what the return on your investment of time will be. And keep in mind that risk and return on investment changes over time. Time is a beast. It is not fun. But once you've done all that, now you're practically testing. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you around the internet.
Hey, great work on that. It's good to see you, Kent. It's been a while. Anyway, thank you so much for that. As soon as you mentioned the David Allen quote, if it takes less than 2 minutes, then do it now. That's one that I'd like to live by, but it can be challenging. And so I'm glad that you addressed that because it's a very real thing.
Yeah, that I am a slave to that. with 4 small kids who leave 2-minute tasks for me around the house all day, I
Mhm.
could spend my whole day just following them around and fixing the 2-minute tasks that they give me.
Which then it just kind of conglomerates into a gigantic, big 2-hour task every time.
Yeah, like a day of having gotten nothing done.
Yeah, exactly. But we have plenty of questions for you in the chat, and so let's get through some of them. Let's see. How do you help others understand your priorities and the time you have available? As a QE, I have devs and PMs messaging me for extra tasks a lot.
Yeah, that it really comes down to helping communicate the situation, because lots of times people don't understand the situation that you're in. And hopefully you're at a functional company where most people are interested in pushing the mission forward, and they will understand that if you're constantly um, dealing with people not understanding the priorities that you have and the time you have available, then that isn't helping push the mission forward. And so you just communicate the impact that their requests on your time are having, and then you can work with them on figuring out a better way to go forward, so that you don't have to deal with that as much.
Yeah, I like to say that when you set boundaries in your work life and even in personal life, boundaries are life's mute button. And you should use those liberally because that will help you,
Mm.
again, get focused, like you say. And then it also kind of keeps you in the right mindset to get everything done.
Yeah, there's a series of books about boundaries. I think the series is called Boundaries. And I listened to that about a year ago, and highly recommended. Just go look it up on Audible or Amazon or whatever. It's a good series.
I'll have to check that one out. How do you determine what units to measure business impact in? Is it always time because time is a universal thing, or should it be dollars? Should it be anything else?
Well, I mean, yeah, time is kind of the universal thing, I think. But like, not all of our time is equal. Like the it's the activities that we spend our time on is what makes an impact to the business. And when we're talking about the mission of the company, um, and like, hopefully the mission of the company is to make the world better in some way. You can find different activities that may be even outside of your regular work that you're doing. So um, yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about the units to measure from a general perspective. Um, but yeah, time is kind of the specific thing that we can all talk about.
Yeah. And so as you are prioritizing things where it's uh you're measuring the business impact, you're paying attention to the company mission. Um, does your team's uncertainty in what that is affect prioritization? I guess this exact question from someone in the audience is, does your team's uncertainty in business impact and likelihood of stuff matter to that prioritization?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Uncertainty is so I remember talking about risk management a little bit in college, and um, I only remember a little bit of this, but yeah, uncertainty is a risk factor on its own, and you need to evaluate. Sometimes you don't know how likely something is, or how big an impact that thing could have if it were to happen, and in those situations, if anybody on the team feels like it is a likely or an impactful thing, then you need to do additional research to figure out how impactful or likely it is to be. Like, we could talk about, well, I mean, there could be a hurricane in Florida. Well, is that going to impact you? Maybe. Like, if your data center happens to be in Florida, then yeah, that could be like pretty majorly impactful in the business, something that we need to mitigate. And if you don't know where your data center is, then like, take the time to find out where it is. So yeah, it the uncertainty typically, I find, is better to eliminate when we're talking about risk management.
And so what about tools when you're figuring out that input impact and prioritization of stuff, especially front end tooling and everything, with the role of monitoring tools, observability tools, any of those? What is their role when you're determining this and prioritizing everything?
Yeah, I would say, like, this aspect of prioritization is something that I never really formalized myself. It's always been something that kind of happens in the back of my mind of like what I'm thinking about on the things that I need to do. It's something I'm thinking about during our sprint planning meetings and stuff. And it's something that I'm hoping my manager is doing, or my product manager is doing, when they're deciding what tasks to put in our backlog. And so I know, because I never really formalized it, I don't have any specific tools to recommend to you. But it's certainly a topic of conversation that you could bring up with your manager, or the product or project manager, to just make sure that they are keeping things, or keeping that under consideration. And typically, at a smaller company, you'll be a lot more privy to the challenges that your company is facing and the focus that you need to have as an engineer. Whereas at a larger company, whether or not you get your feature done isn't going to sink the company, most likely. So unless they're paying you a ton of money to be like the one person in charge of the Amazon's checkout button or something, which good on you. I hope they're paying you well enough for that.
um, that's funny. The next question was, do you have any tips for embracing practically testing as a team culture and getting everyone on the same page?
Yeah, that's tough. Getting people on the same page with anything is a challenge, and testing is certainly no exception to this. Especially like testing, especially is challenging because everybody has their own definitions of what an integration test it even is. So yeah, that is a challenge. So I have a blog post titled "Business and Engineering Alignment" that where I talk about how to align, or basically how to get what you want, and the secret is that either what you want is best for the business or you change what you want, and that's how you get what you want. And so if what you want is what's best for the business, then you can help steer the or like your goal is just to help encourage people to um, get on the same page as you are, and have the same understanding that you do, that what you want is what's best for the company. And so when it comes to team alignment on prioritization and stuff, it typically comes down to helping them understand how the idea that you have will impact the company, and all of this is under the assumption that everybody is on the same page on wanting to push the mission of the company forward. And that's not always the case. Sometimes people are just out for number one, and they're like, what's good for the company but bad for my career is an easy answer for those kinds of people. I obviously am always going to do what's better for my career in their minds. And you know, it's hard to blame them for those cases, but hopefully what's good for their career is also what's good for the company. And I would say that any functional or most functional companies would operate that way. So anyway, with all of that as the backdrop, it comes down to identifying the mission of the company and helping everybody see that what you have in mind is what's best for the pushing the mission of the company forward. And coming together on prioritizing tests properly is just one of the many aspects of things. You know, we can talk about design and how it's important to have, you know, good mock-ups, you know, ready for when developers are going to implement those things. And there, you could apply this same concept to anything. It doesn't have to be necessarily testing.
Yeah. And so you've mentioned quite a few times talking about like what's best for the company and best for careers and stuff. But from an individual perspective, we're constantly testing ourselves and figuring out what we want to do with our own careers, whether it's staying at these companies who might prioritize things differently than we would, going to big companies and small companies and stuff. There's a couple audience questions about this. And so this first one is, how do you balance between your work and upskilling? And how can you combine them? How can you balance them to figure out what's new and useful and how to improve yourself in your career, whether it's in the company or outside of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in my mind, upskilling was always what was best for the company. Me upskilling myself was a good thing for the company. And so I had no problems giving time, like work time, to upskilling. Now, of course, I'm not going to spend all of my time just going through tutorials and stuff. That's not an effective way to upskill anyway. Just FYI, you need to be building stuff. That's the best way to upskill. But sometimes you're at a company and you're literally doing the same thing all of the time, and that's also not an effective way to upskill. And so, yeah, I definitely spent some of my work time when I was at PayPal, or even before then, every company that I've been at, doing a fair amount of research and learning on the job. And I think that is in line with the company mission. Any company that was like, no, you need to do that on your own time, it's like, I'm not going to be there for very long, because I think the company is interested in pushing their mission forward. Then they want me to be as sharp as I possibly can be. And that means that I stay up to date with what's going on in the ecosystem. So there's certainly a balance there that you have to kind of figure out. And unfortunately, I can't really tell you what that balance is. That's something that you experience on your own. But I guess the substance of my answer is definitely upskilling is an important aspect of being a good employee at any company.
Yeah, and I do think I agree with you so much that if a company disagrees with that, you shouldn't be there for very long. One of the podcasts that I hosted, it's talking with a bunch of CTOs and CIOs of these companies, and you always ask, what is the most uncuttable budget item? And it's always interesting to hear what people say, but it's very consistently, at least 80-90% of the time, training and upskilling and that sort of thing. And so it's almost always in the company's best interest that you are improving yourself in some way. Absolutely.
And in fact, I think that that's a good important note too, is that the company should be paying for your education as well. Now, whether or not they pay for you to go get a master's degree or something, that I don't feel like they're morally obligated to do that. They're awesome if they do. But certainly, like, paying for Epic React is a $600 course. It's a pretty significant chunk of change, but it's a pretty significant upskill too. But that's the sort of thing that a company should absolutely be paying for. And I'm always much happier taking money from your boss than I am taking money from you. Firmly believe that companies should be paying for the education of their employees.
Strongly agree. And so as you are upskilling and improving yourself, do you have any metrics or benchmarks that you use as you prioritize for yourself and as you increase your impact?
I don't really track that a whole lot. And maybe I should, but I've always kind of had the approach of just focus on getting better, and the metrics will follow. I also have a firm belief that, as you know, when performance is measured, performance improves. And so maybe I should measure my improvement or my performance so that I can improve more rapidly. But I pretty much don't track my my level of upskilling at all. And I often don't even have a plan in place. Well, one thing that I do, though, is I kind of mentally tick off things that I will not do. Because when we are there's just so much that you could learn. There's so many things that you could learn. And so it can get really overwhelming, and you can have a really shallow understanding of many things and provide pretty not a whole lot of value to yourself or anybody else with that shallow understanding of many things. And so because of that, and to avoid feeling overwhelmed, I will kind of say, I'm not going to learn this, I'm not going to learn that. And that helps me kind of focus a little bit.
I think that is incredibly real because there are so many things. It's both a blessing and a curse that there's so many resources out there today. Because when I was learning how to code, there was none of this. I basically had to view source of a website and try to figure out what an HTML tag meant. And now you can learn anything. And I think what you say is very true. Where sometimes you just have to know what you aren't interested in learning. And that's something that I think Dan Abramov, he made a post at one point. And for those who don't know, he's on the React core team. He made a blog post once where it's just things I don't know. And it was really, really interesting how vulnerable and true it was, where there were some things where you're just like, you don't know how to do that. Fascinating. And it's not the biggest deal. It's just not necessary for him to know. And I think it's very okay to do that. And we need to accept that you don't need to know everything in this industry.
Absolutely. There's too much. Nobody can know it all. And it can be overwhelming. So deciding what you're not going to learn is almost as important as deciding what you are.
Right. Exactly. And I think in terms of the measurement, if I were to jump in on this question too, setting goals for yourself is great. Where you don't need to say how am I improving over time? You could say, I want to get to this point. I want to be able to build an app with this or test an app this way or be able to use this tool. And getting to that, you can kind of figure out how you grow over time because you can get to that point and then set goals beyond that.
Yeah, that's a really great insight. And I often, I have over 180 blog posts on my blog, I think something like that. And then I've got more on Epic React. There are articles on there too. And the majority of those blog posts aren't just I want to teach people how to do this, I'm going to write an article about this, but it's an offshoot of some other thing that I was doing. So I'll commit myself to accomplish some goal. So for me, because I'm an educator, it's mostly I need to build this workshop to teach people this. But in the process of doing that, I'm working on different tools to do that. In fact, React Testing Library came from a workshop that I was working on, and so that the things that are often the most visible to people are offshoots of my learning process of a specific thing that I'm trying to accomplish. And so, yeah, I agree. Make a goal of an outcome, and then the learning comes as a side effect of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question that's mostly for my own curiosity and stuff. But you said React Testing Library came out of a workshop. Could you give a little bit of history around that?
Yeah, sure. So I was at Assert.js, and I taught I gave a testing workshop there, and I was going to give that same testing workshop to a group at Trulia, and then later, 2 months later, at Front-End Masters. And between the Assert.js workshop and the Trulia workshop, I was just every time I give a workshop, I'm iterating, making it better. And I was really frustrated because I like to make the workshop or the learning be I am working without the abstraction, and now I'm going to solve all the problems I have by not having the abstraction by adding one. And so we were using Enzyme, and it was just a real frustration jumping from React DOM.render into using Enzyme because there was just a huge leap. And then I was also going to prepare this document that's here are all the things you should never do with Enzyme because they're always bad. And shallow rendering was on that list, but also getting components by their name and different things like that. There were just so many things I was don't ever do this. So finally I decided, you know what, I don't want to have to deal with that. And the React DOM render is actually pretty nice. It was fine. And so I decided that's the way that we're going to progress. And eventually I realized that it made more sense for me to make a little abstraction. It was 10 lines long. And I realized, you know what, this is actually pretty great. And so I published it as a library. It became a little bit longer, but it fit in a screenshot, and I tweeted about it. And that's where React Testing Library came from. Eventually, we added a whole bunch of other things, and now it's quite a bit bigger. And now there's DOM Testing Library, and that's why we have Cypress Testing Library, because now anywhere where you have a DOM, you can test with DOM Testing Library. So we have Vue Testing Library and Angular Testing Library, and this is becoming increasingly the de facto standard testing tool for whatever platform or framework whatever platform but yeah, that's where React Testing Library that's where React Testing. So like 2 weeks after I released it, there were like 60 or 80 engineers there. It's like, hey, everybody, I'm there. Teach you how to test. Hey, everybody, brand new open source library. I hope you don't hate me after I hope you don't hate me. And then like a month later, and then like a month later, I went to run a master's. And luckily, it worked out.
Thank you so much for that. It was really, really cool hearing the story. I at least understood what you were saying, even though it got a little robotic at the end. And I really, really appreciate your time and for your talk and just being able to hear your wisdom once again.